Today we are tracking the political money trail, and we're going to uncover some pretty surprising facts about campaign cash.
We really are. Everything from a confidential ethics probe of a prominent member of Congress.
All the way to exactly how much of your taxpayer money is fueling local races.
Right.
So our mission in this deep dive is to really map out the financial landscape of political campaigns.
And we're sticking strictly to the data here. Financial disclosures, official reports, we want to see where the money comes from and, where it goes.
And who is watching the watchman? So let's start right there with the scrutiny.
Okay.
Our source and document this confidential review. It's review number 21-4803, and it was conducted by the Office of Congressional Ethics, the OCE.
And this was focused on Representative Ilhan Omar.
Exactly. And this wasn't just routine paperwork. It was looking at some pretty serious allegations about her financial conduct.
So what were they specifically looking at?
Well, two key things. First, whether she might have, failed to include required information on her annual financial disclosure report.
Which are foundational. I mean, that's the whole basis for transparency in Congress.
Totally. And the second thing was whether she got an advance payment on royalties for her memoir.
That's the one called This Is What America Looks Like, right?
That's the one. They were looking at whether that payment might have violated House rules about outside income.
Okay, so those are the allegations. But with these ethics inquiries, it's so important to look at the outcome, not just the accusation.
That is the crucial point here.
Yeah.
Because that brings us to the core finding of that confidential report.
Right.
Despite all that intense scrutiny, the OCE board, in the end, recommended dismissing both of the allegations.
Both of them?
Both of them. It was a 6-0 vote on December 17th, 2021. And their conclusion was, and I'm quoting here, there was not substantial reason to believe she had committed the violations.
So that specific inquiry is really important for context, you see. It shows the system designed to scrutinize these things was active.
It worked.
It worked. It reviewed the data, and in this case, it found there wasn't enough evidence to move forward. But that's just one piece of the puzzle.
It really is,
Yeah.
because the larger story, our sources show, is just the sheer overwhelming scale of money flowing everywhere else in politics.
Often with much less direct scrutiny.
That's the pivot we need to make. So let's zoom out from that one case and look at the whole 2019-2020 election cycle. We are talking about massive amounts of cash.
I mean, if you look at the whole ecosystem, it's enormous. For that 2-year period, we're tracking activity from 445 political committees and funds.
445.
And that's not all. Add to that 73 independent expenditure committees plus 2 ballot question committees.
Wow. And when you add up all the money from that entire ecosystem,
Yeah.
what are we talking about for that cycle?
The totals are just, they're huge. The total receipts, all the money coming in for all those registered groups was over $116.5 million.
116 million. Just for one state's election cycle.
Just think about that. And then the disbursements, the actual money that was spent on things like ads, staff, campaigns.
The cash out the door.
That was also huge. It came to over $44.6 million. That's a massive investment in trying to shape political outcomes.
Okay, so let's narrow that focus a bit. Let's talk about the candidates themselves, the people whose names are actually on the ballot for the state Senate and House.
Good idea.
How much cash flowed directly from, individual citizens into their campaigns?
The numbers are still really impressive. For Senate candidates, they raised just over $6 million from individual donors.
And for the House?
Almost the same. They raised slightly more, also
Yeah.
topping that $6 million mark. So citizens are definitely engaged with their checkbooks.
But when you break down where those donations come from, it tells a really different story about influence, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. This is where you really start to see the concentration of wealth. Our sources show that contributions of $500 or more.
So the major donations.
Exactly. They had immense sway, especially for Senate campaigns. For those candidates, the big checks totaled $3.5 million.
Hold on. So if they raised just over $6 million from individuals total, and $3.5 million came from those large checks.
You see where this is going. It means that 44% of all contributions Senate candidates received came from just 4,396 major donations.
So less than 5,000 people across the entire state.
That is the critical insight here. A campaign's financial health really depends on courting a very small pool of major donors.
In keeping them happy.
Of course, because their money provides the bulk of the hard dollars.
Okay, so we've established the power of that large private check. This brings us right to the state's public subsidy program. I mean, that's supposed to be the safety valve, right?
It is. The system's designed to let average citizens direct their own tax dollars into political funding.
It's a little checkoff box on your tax form.
That's the one. It's been there since 1987. You can dedicate a maximum of $5 per taxpayer to the party or candidate you want to support. It's an attempt to, democratize funding.
So how many candidates actually sign up for this? Do they take the public money?
Oh, yeah. It's highly accepted. The sources show a 92% participation rate among legislative candidates who filed for office.
92%.
Yep. That's 428 out of 464 candidates who signed an agreement to get that cash.
And the total taxpayer contribution from this system, what did that add up to?
It's substantial. It was over $2.1 million paid out to legislative candidates during that cycle.
So let's follow that money. Where did that $2.1 million actually go?
Well, it was split pretty evenly. Senate candidates received about $1.06 million, and House candidates got just a little bit more, also around $1.06 million.
And the party broke down.
When you look at the 2020 numbers, the data shows that the DFL, the Democratic Farmer Labor candidates, and their party units, they got the larger share.
How much larger?
They received about $1.34 million.
Okay, and for the other major party, the RPM, the Republicans.
RPM candidates and their party units received just under $800,000. So a pretty significant difference there.
And that distribution, it really highlights something interesting about this system that's supposed to democratize funding.
What's that?
It ends up really favoring the two major political parties. I mean, if you look at the minor parties like the Libertarians, the Greens.
Right, the Legal Marijuana Now party.
They signed up, but the structure almost seems to work against them.
That's what we call the return to sender effect in the data, because these smaller parties either didn't have candidates in a lot of districts or their candidate ran unopposed.
So they couldn't spend the money.
Exactly. So the public subsidy funds that were set aside for them were largely returned to the state's general fund. We saw over 122,000 returned from Senate party accounts and another 134,000 from House accounts.
So the system's there for them, but they just don't have the infrastructure to use it.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, so if the public subsidy system is supposed to counter the influence of those big $500 checks, the final piece of this puzzle really shows why that's such an uphill battle.
You're talking about independent expenditures.
This is where the true financial titans operate.
And this is such a crucial distinction for you to understand. An independent expenditure, or an IE, is money spent to directly support or oppose a candidate.
But, and this is the key, it's done without any coordination with the candidate's campaign.
Exactly. Think of it this way. A candidate's own campaign, funded by those individual checks, can only accept certain amounts of money. But an IE group is like an independent fan club.
A fan club with really deep pockets.
With very deep pockets. They can take unlimited contributions, even corporate money, and buy all the ads they want, as long as they never actually talk to the candidate about it.
And these IE groups and their PEGs, their political action committees, this is where the organized money really is.
Absolutely.
Let's just look at the scale of this. For groups often aligned with the DFL, labor unions, progressive groups, the catch is enormous. Education Minnesota's PAC contributed over $627,000.
Wow.
The Minnesota Nurses Association Political Committee, over $602,000. And AFSCME Council 5's People Fund, nearly $350,000.
So this isn't just a few people writing checks. This is major institutional funding.
And it's the same on the business and conservative side, which often supports RPM candidates. The financial muscle is just as strong.
For example,
The Minnesota Chamber of Commerce Leadership Fund's receipts totaled over $237,000. We see big corporate interests, like the Fager Drinker State Political Fund, kicking in $50,000.
and you've also got the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association. Their fund contributed over $102,000.
And we can't forget the significant political investment from key tribal entities. That's another major force. The Shakopee and Mdewakanton Sioux reported over $936,000 in total contributions.
Almost $1 million. So let's make this real. Let's look at how this IE money gets targeted in specific races. This is how raw financial power turns into pressure.
Right. We see groups focusing their money to defeat candidates. For example, the Alliance for a Better Minnesota Action Fund spent over $187,000 against an RPM Senate candidate, David Senjum.
Just against that one guy.
And it wasn't just them. The Everytown for Gun Safety Action Fund spent another $136,000 against Senjum in that same race.
So wait, that one single candidate was the target of over $320,000 in negative outside spending.
That's what the data shows. And conversely, groups do the same to support their allies. The pro-jobs majority, a business IE group, spent over $8,000 against a DFL House candidate, Ginny Clevorn.
It's micro-targeted, race by race.
But the truly mind-boggling numbers are when you add up all the independent expenditures for a candidate.
Let's take an example.
Okay, let's look at DFL Senate candidate Josiah Hill. He saw nearly $300,000 in support from IEs.
300,000.
Yep. The Alliance for a Better Minnesota Action Fund spent over $242,000 for him, and Climate Vote Minnesota added another $83,000 for him.
And you have to put that in perspective. Remember, we said the public funding system for all candidates statewide was about $2 million?
Right.
This one single candidate got almost $300,000 in free, uncoordinated advertising and support. It just dwarfs any small donor contributions.
And for comparison, his opponent, that same RPM candidate David Sinjum, he saw about $68,000 in 4 IEs from conservative groups.
It just shows you how these outside spending machines can completely change the financial reality of a race overnight.
So this deep dive has really taken us through the whole political finance environment. We started with that confidential review system.
Showing the ethical machinery is active, it's looking at high-profile people, and in the case of Representative Omar, it ultimately dismissed the claims.
But the real lesson for you listening is the sheer magnitude of the whole system underneath.
Right. We went from that one scrutinized individual to this vast ecosystem. Over $116 million circulating, $3.5 million from a tiny pool of major donors.
And just $2.14 million coming from taxpayer subsidies.
And we showed that the dominant financial power really belongs to these organized interests, unions, business PACs, special interests.
And they are spending millions more in these independent expenditures, which often eclipse the money the candidate raises themselves.
The data makes it pretty clear. Even these local, state-level races are financial battlegrounds. The stakes are huge, and the money is highly, highly organized.
So we'll leave you with this final provocative thought, and this is based only on the data we've talked about.
Okay.
Does a public subsidy program one that provides about $2.1 million to try and reduce the influence of big private checks, does it truly function as a safeguard?
When, at the same time, you have these organized political funds spending millions more in independent expenditures.
Essentially providing hundreds of thousands of dollars in free services to their favorite candidates. Is the public system just being drowned out by the sheer volume of all that outside money?
It's something for you to consider as you watch the financial dynamics of the next election cycle.